Andrew, thanks so much for joining us inside the Ice House.
Thank you. This is easily the most exotic location I've sat in front of a microphone in.
Yeah, it is. It's a great ambiance. It's a great setting for podcasts here at the New York Stock Exchange. And of course, we're here to have you talk about your book, your new book, The Creative Shift, how to power up your organization by making space for new ideas. I read it. It was an easy read, I think, most importantly, on my train rides in from New Jersey. But before we get into it, I just want to talk about your career first. And you've been in the business for a long time. You've been leading BBDO since 2004 through some of the most creatively awarded years in advertising. Just what was the spark that made you decide that now was the right time to write The Creative Shift? And what do you hope leaders inside and outside the creative industries take away from it?
I have, you didn't use the word you could have used, which is you're old and you spent a lot of time in the business.
Not true.
But I've had a wonderful career, and it's enabled me to see deep inside a lot of different companies and organizations in lots and lots of different categories in different parts of the world. And I've observed the same thing time and time again, which is leaders who know that they need ideas, that their organization needs ideas, genuinely creative ideas, completely new solutions to old or new problems in order to thrive. But they struggle to get them. And they struggle to get them for all sorts of reasons, which I go into in the book, and I come up with some of the remedies for that. But fundamentally, one of the things, or the things that make companies really successful, especially if you think about what happens on other floors here, it are things like predictable results, operational excellence, executional brilliance. These are all things that make companies really successful and great. They are also the same things that can suppress ideas. And my argument is not that those companies should change, because what they're doing works and it's important and it's part of what makes them successful. Rather, what I think we should be looking to do is to use exactly the same discipline to engineer the conditions that will allow those companies to unlock the ideas of their people when and where they need it. It's not all the time everywhere, but treat it. I mean, John Cleese said creativity is not a gift. He says not a talent. He said it's a way of operating. And I think we just need to institutionalize that way of operating in order to allow companies to get the ideas out of their people, which I'm sure are there.
So the creative shift to me feels like both individual mindset changes as well as team-wide cultural change. When you just think about the word, right, the creative shift, how do you define it in practical terms? And how is it different from just saying, hey, we need to be more innovative or we need to change things up?
So two parts to that question. The first is what I regard as the difference between innovation and true creativity. And they're both valuable, but I think they're different. Innovation, to my mind, is a word that's probably been diluted through excessive use, and really now means continuous improvement that definitely is worth doing and increases business, but it's measured in percentages. So, for example, if PepsiCo introduces a new flavor of Pepsi, that I regard as an innovation, and it will help increase sales of Pepsi by a percentage. But when you introduce a completely new concept into the category, as Gatorade was in its day, for example, or Red Bull was, that to me is a creation, not just an innovation. And companies need both. I believe that in order to have those truly creative ideas, completely new solutions to problems that people have either identified or just come across, that's what you need the shift for. And the shift is an intentional move, it's the closest word I could get, intentional move to create the conditions that will allow those ideas to come up.
Sure. So throughout your career at BBDO, the firm's gained notoriety as the world's most effective network 5 times, and as Network of the Decade at Cannes Lion. You yourself inducted into the Advertising Hall of Fame in 2022, so I know a little overdue, but congratulations 3 years later. How have these experiences of success, as well as the challenges to reach such levels, influenced your writing and shaped the insights in the creative shift?
So, having said that, I've spent a career looking at clients struggle with this issue. I've also been running a creative organization. That's all we do. Like, we live or die by the ideas that we come up with every single day. And so what I've tried to do is take the learnings that I've had from watching our organization be creative and figure out how you can engineer those into moments in different types of organization. Because, if AT&T is handling a third of the world's data every day, you don't really want people being creative 24 hours a day and everywhere willy-nilly. But you do need it at times.
Sure.
And it's like, how do you make that shift when you need it?
Yeah, like you said, there's a time and place for everything, right? And
Correct.
that time and place varies depending on the company, depending on what they do, depending on the industry that they're in.
100%. And this is really important because a lot of people come out and say, oh, well, you should change. You should create a new culture. You should be a much more creative culture. I don't think so. There's a reason why these companies are as successful as they are. And it's because they do the things they do as well as they do. I don't want to change that. I just want to add this as a new process, a new operation.
So early in the book, you discuss the challenges facing the flow of creativity in the workplace. These include leaders understanding the importance of creativity, the need for leaders the need for leaders and employees to nurture new ideas when presented. So just from your perspective, what can leaders do to make sure great ideas, when the time and place comes and when these great ideas spawn, what can leaders do to make sure that they get nurtured and they don't get lost before they have a chance to grow?
I think that if I was to break the whole thing down into specific steps, and I think leaders have an important role to play in making sure each of these steps happens, it would be this. First of all, you have to define a really wonderful question. And a wonderful question is a question that is so interesting, it kind of begs you to try and solve it. It's like a riddle or a quiz or something. You just want to try and solve it. And all too often, what you see is the definition of the question or the definition of the problem is simply a declaration of intent. We want to grow sales by $2 billion, or a description of the situation. We're losing share amongst Gen X. I'm giving two examples, but you'll see those things showing up as, quotes, the problem to be solved. And the first thing leaders should do, I think, is push for much more focused, much more interesting, sharper questions. And there's various techniques that people can use to do that.
So move away. Sorry to interrupt. So move away from the broad, as you've been saying, more towards the specific.
Yeah.
Really.
It's not just specific. It becomes more interesting. And if it's more interesting, people are more likely to be able to think of ideas to solve it. So usually, I would say the biggest single problem is the problem. It's not well enough defined. And there's lots of techniques that people can use to get to better questions. But I think leaders should be putting pressure on their teams to really define great questions. That's step one. Step two is the generation of ideas. And this is, again, a phase in which leaders have a key role to play. In order to have a good idea, you're probably going to need to have 10, which means you're going to have 9 bad ones. And most leaders create the expectation amongst their people that they want to hear a good idea. That's a really high bar to set. So one of the things you need to do as a leader, in my view, when you're in the idea generation phase, and it's important, I'll talk about how these phases differ, but the idea generation phase is you want lots of ideas, and you want lots of bad ideas, and you want to show your people not only that bad ideas are good, they're expected. We want them. We want all of these ideas, because when you generate ideas in volume, those ideas stimulate new ideas, and the more you have, the more likely you are to find something good. All too often, as I said, the expectation that people have of their leaders is that they want me to come up with a good idea. And that's a hard thing to do. So that would be the second big part.
Failure is okay.
It's not even failure, because this is the beauty of ideas is they have no risk. They only become a risk if you execute them, which is why you have to separate the generation of ideas from the judgment and the execution of ideas. The generation of ideas has no risk at all. If anything, the risk is that you're not going to generate them. So actively encouraging as many ideas as possible, which will include bad ideas, is part of it. And I think one of the ways that leaders can do that is to have bad ideas themselves and say, here's my idea. Come on, where's the next one? They'll come. That's in the idea generation phase. The third phase is the idea judgment phase. This is when you've got a whole body of ideas, you now need to decide which ones you think have got real potential. Part of the problem in most situations is that those two steps get conflated. So people are judging ideas as they're being generated, and that kills off ideas, and it prevents people coming up with new ones. So you have to consciously separate generating ideas from judging ideas. And when it comes to judging ideas, again, this is where you start to have risk, because if you're going to act on one of these ideas, there's going to be risk attached to it. Two things that I think leaders can do with that to help that be really effective. The first is to deal with the ideas one at a time and look for what is good in them. Part of the challenge when you've got lots of ideas is our natural inclination is to try and reduce the list by deselection. And the way you deselect psychologically is by looking for things that are wrong. And if you start doing that, you'll find things wrong in everything. It's much better to say, we've got 10 ideas. Let's talk about this one. What is great about this idea? What could be better? And do that 10 times. And then you'll come to a view on what the best two ideas.
Is it as simple as, okay, you want to look for what's great, and then we sort of look at the pros before the cons? Is it as simple as, hey, the idea that we're going to produce, or the idea that we're going to continue to pursue, is it the one that just has the most grades attached to it? Is it as simple as a numerical value?
Grades are good, and what we tend to encourage if we're doing this as one exercise, it's not always done like that, but if you're doing it as we do in a workout, for example, we just give everybody little post-it, little circles, green ones, and you just go and stick them on anything you think is great. And then you'll get a heat map, in effect, of greatness. Then when you've got that, then you can move to the second part of the judgment, which is think like a banker. And that really came from an experience I had in Australia, where our agency had done an amazing campaign for the National Australian Bank. The problem they were dealing with was that the public thought that the four big banks worked in collusion with each other and couldn't believe that they weren't. And because of that, because they couldn't get over that hump, there was no way that they could hear the good things that NAB was doing. They'd introduced a load of services that were really valuable. So to get over the first hump, we did a campaign which was called the Big Breakup, and the idea was that on Valentine's Day, the NAB broke up with the other banks. It was very funny. It was like, it's not us, it's you. We're fed up with your lying and your cheating. We're going our own way. Social media, balloons, everything. Hugely effective. Won an effectiveness Grand Prix. Increased the number of transactional accounts by 80%. Wow. It was extraordinary. And I went to see the CEO of this bank, because people say, you need to be bold when you're judging ideas. People say, this is a great idea. Come on, be bold. Take a swing. And I said to him, that was that was really bold. Thank you for doing that. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, agreeing to publicly break up with the other banks, that was a big deal. And he said, he looked at me like I had two heads, and he said, you're out of your mind. He said, I'm a banker. I'm not paid to be bold. I'm paid to manage risk. And when your guys presented this idea, they were all very excited about what it could do. And I was excited about what I could do, but none of us could know what it would do.
Yeah.
What I did was I mentally calculated the downside. I identified it and put a value on it. And I said, I looked at it and I thought, the worst that can happen is we're going to be laughed at for 3 weeks. We're not going to lose a corporate client. We're not going to lose a retail customer. We might be the butt of humor on late night TV shows. I might have some very awkward moments at the golf club. But after 3 weeks, that would wash away and something else would take its place.
Cyclical nature.
And on the basis that I could live with the downside, I went ahead. And what you see most often when people are evaluating ideas is the pursuit of certainty. It's what people crave. And again, if you go right back to what is it that makes companies as successful as they are, predictability and certainty is a key element, but not when you're judging ideas, because you can't be. So instead of pursuing certainty, which in my view will inevitably result in the norm, the closer you get to certainty, the closer you will get to the norm. Manage the risk. Identify it, quantify it, decide whether you can live with it or not. If you can't, can it be mitigated? If it can't, do something else. But I think that's another really important part that leaders can add. And then the final part is when you've made that decision, you've picked the right idea, then give it to the experts to execute. Because they know what they're doing when it comes to executing. And what you see, again, far too often is these things colliding with each other in organized. So the question collides with the generation of idea that collides also with the judgment of the idea and even sometimes the execution of the idea. And if you can consciously, operationally separate those four buckets, I think you've got a much better chance of getting there. So
you mentioned that pursuit of certainty, and I think that just speaks to leaders' desire to, when faced with can we be more creative, can we remain with the status quo, they'll choose the status quo more often than not. I would think, at least, again, dependent on organization, dependent on what a company does, dependent on the industry, I feel like because the status quo is more certain and more toward the norm, they may tend to choose the status quo more. So with that being said, why do you think breaking away from that status quo is so difficult for a lot of people? Because I feel like it's hard.
Because it works.
To take that next step.
Because it works. People will talk about the imperative of a burning platform as a thing that drives change. And in a way, it's easy when the platform's burning because you have to do something different. Where it gets hard is where you have something that's really working and really working well, and everybody's patting you on the back and clapping because you're doing such a good job doing that thing really well. That's when it becomes really hard to do something different because, as you said, there's certainty in that, and it's a good certainty. It's not just we're certain this is going to be awful. It's we're certain this is going to work. So that's when it gets hard. And again, that's when I think you have to think like a banker. What are the upside? Don't really know, but think it could be great. Downside, I can quantify.
So at the beginning of chapter 2, you quote copywriter David Abbott by saying, there isn't an advertising problem in the world that can't be solved in 2 days if you put the right people on it. Is he right? Is he being too optimistic?
No, I think he's right. I mean, I should say he went on to say, but please don't tell anybody because he always wanted more time, as everybody always would. I think the right bunch of people focused on a really well-crafted question in 2 days will be able to come up with a winning idea. As long as you approach it the way we've been talking about, which is generate lots of ideas and then after the 2 days, settle down to judge them.
How can leaders because as you continue on in the book, you specifically highlight these compliance-based companies.
Yeah.
So in those compliance-based companies where they have to follow rules and regulations and they have certain values and morals that they have to follow to a T, how can leaders in those environments create a space where people feel safe to contribute creatively? Because it's one thing to be tasked with contributing creatively. It's a whole nother thing, I think, to not be tasked, but still have that push and that motivation to share ideas. But it's hard, obviously, in those compliance-based companies. So how can leaders create environments to make sure that their employees feel safe to do that, to go to their office and say, hey, I have a good idea. It's something we haven't been doing. Maybe the status quo is working, but why can't we try to take it another step further?
So, I mean, I think that over time you can get to the point where people might feel like that, where I've had this idea. It's not in response to anything in particular, but I want to take it to something. But I think really where I see the biggest opportunity is to make the shift, to consciously create a separate space, environment, separate conditions where it's clear that this is not business as usual. This is a moment when we are all going to do something very different. Sure. And it has a beginning, it has an end. And in between those two, we're going to do something different. And I think that if you, in effect, you're kind of making that a process in and of itself. You're making, as bizarre as it sounds, you're making people compliant with the uncompliant process. Sure. But I think that's how it has to be done. Because if you don't make it part of the way the company works, people will be rightly anxious and nervous and will hold back, because that's what should happen most of the time.
So, Andrew, toward the end of the book, you mention a question you believe creatives should ask themselves every day, WWTD. Now, that means what would Taylor do? And that Taylor, of course, is Taylor Swift, who's just as relevant now as she is ever, having, of course, just appeared on Jason and Travis Kelce's podcast. What's the story behind that question, and how can adopting that WWTD mindset, what would Taylor do mindset, help creatives push themselves and grow?
Well, I when you say creatives in that sentence, I mean, I think that's, how can that help everybody who's trying to create growth? It came about because I was on my way to Australia. And I'd had an email from the guy who ran a group in Australia saying, would you do a town hall with all the people who are in the building and just give them your view on the future of advertising? And I said, sure. And then when I was on the plane, I thought, oh my God, that sounds so boring. I can't possibly do that.
You have to spice it up a little bit.
Yeah. And it was during, Taylor Swift had she'd been in Australia the week before.
Got it.
And everybody had gone crazy. And it was on doing her Eras tour. And so I thought, well, I think what I'm going to do is talk about how Taylor Swift creates. And the elements of that are, first of all, and it's fascinating to see her do it again last week, she makes her move at the top of her cycle. So she doesn't wait until she's disappeared from view. She doesn't wait until her songs aren't selling. She doesn't wait until they're not being downloaded on. When she's right at the crest is when she creates the next thing. And it emerged that this new, Life of a Showgirl was created
during the
she
Eras
was,
tour,
yeah, which is just remarkable. Yeah. So that's how her mind works, which is I'm in the middle of the most successful live tour in history, and what I'm thinking about is what I'm going to do next.
Yeah,
up to and including I haven't watched the whole podcast, but I've seen the snippets that have found their way onto social media. The fact that on her exit from the last show, she went through an orange door, which has come back, 18 months later, orange. So first thing is, when you're at your peak, that's when you need to think of what the next thing is going to be, not when you're on the way down. The second thing is, she has a remarkable way of seeing the opportunities other people can't see because she looks for them, but also seeing the opportunities that exist in problems. Mm-hmm. Getting her music back was something she desperately wanted to do. She finally did it last year, but prior to that, she had this brilliant idea of re-recording all of her albums as Taylor's version, using her platform to get publicity for all of that, and then selling millions of those albums. Same music, same songs, just re-recorded, because she figured out there was a way for her to own those.
Yeah. I mean, she said in the podcast that in contracts, that's not anything that record labels were even thinking of. No one even thought, hey, I could just re-record all my old songs, until she did it.
So that there is a creative answer buried in all of these problems. She's always finding that. She did it with the movie of the Eras tour, which conventional wisdom would have said, we'll run that as a Netflix special 8 months after the tour finishes. We'll record it during the tour, but we'll run it after. She didn't do that. She recognized just how valuable the communal experience was. She saw how people were responding to the concerts. And she took that data point. She took another data point, which is lots of people couldn't get tickets to go and see her live, even though she sold as many as she did. She took a third data point, which wasn't connected to either of those two, which is movie theaters are empty. Yeah. And they're especially not attracting young girls. She put them all together, went to AMC and said, I want to launch the movie of the show in your movie theaters. The tickets are going to be $19.89, connecting back to the first album, or not her first album, but one of her albums. And I wanted to do it while the tour is still going. And what's in it for you is you're going to get people back into the theaters who haven't been going to the theaters. And what's in it for me is I'm going to create an experience for my fans who either have and want to have it again, seen the tour, or all those who didn't. And I just think that was, again, another brilliant bit of creative thinking for taking 3 different data points and coming up with a solution that nobody else would have seen. Yeah.
So, Andrew, we've been talking about your book, The Creative Shift, and as we begin to wrap up our conversation, we're at a moment now where technology and AI really is accelerating faster than most of us can fully process. In your view, where does the uniquely human side of creativity fit in over the next decade, merging it obviously with everything that has already come with AI and will continue to come with AI? And how can leaders make sure they're harnessing both the power of that technology and, we talked about the magic, but the magic of this human imagination?
So I should say up front that I'm unbelievably excited about AI and what it can bring to us, business, and the world. And I'm excited about it for lots of reasons. One is, the obvious thing, that it can free up time from work that can be done by machines as well as it can be done by humans, if not better. But at least as it relates to our business, the thing I'm most excited about is closing the gap that exists between having an idea and bringing it to life. That fourth bucket of execution. Because so often what happens now, and so much time goes into trying to get an idea made. There's gaps of money. It's a great idea, but it's going to cost too much money. There's a gap of time. It's a great idea, but it's going to take too long. And there's a gap of feasibility. It's a great idea, but you can't actually do it. Yeah. That is disappearing. If you've got an idea, you can bring it to life in minutes, not months, for dollars, not millions of dollars, and in ways that haven't been possible before. And if we use that opportunity, as I think we can and should, to put more and more great ideas in front of people, that will win. Everybody wins. Yeah. The people who have those ideas see them come to life. The people they come to life for experience them are grateful for them, and reward brands with their business so you get growth. If we do that, that's just such a wonderful thing for improving my business, my client's business, and the lives of consumers. Mm-hmm. All good. As it relates specifically to the generation of ideas, I think generative AI and AI has two great contributions and two great ways of value. One is it is really good at generating lots of ideas. Yeah. And as I said, step 2 is about generating ideas. So we should be using AI as like one of the members of a brainstorming session, because it will generate a lot of ideas. Some of them will be okay. A lot of them will be bad, but that's okay because we want volume. Now, I don't think yet, maybe this will change, but I don't think yet AI would have come up with launching Taylor's movie in AMC movie theaters while the tour was still going. So getting her the information, it could help with. But I think it takes human creativity to go, but if I put that together with this, because it's not in answer to a single question, it's putting it all together, then you can have something totally new. So I see it as a fantastic partner to creative people. I don't see it replacing the best creative ideas, but I think it should help us accelerate having them.
So Andrew, as we wrap up our conversation, you spent your career championing creativity in others. How do you keep your own creative energy charged and keep new ideas flowing?
I just find it incredibly, I keep looking at more work. And every time I look at things, I get sometimes depressed and occasionally inspired. And again, it's about volume. Yeah. If you look at lots and lots of things, you'll see something that inspires you, and that'll get you to the next one. I was in Rome a couple of years ago, and I went to the Borghese Museum, and it's the first time I've let go of the need to retain what I'm learning. Had a fantastic guide, and she was showing us around and talking as knowledgeable guys can about these remarkable pieces of art, which were in many ways the exact opposite of what I was talking about with AI. You know, somebody has an idea to create a statue of, Daphne, and it's like 4 years work.
Yeah.
Not
quickly putting a prompt into a,
exactly.
Gen AI technology.
But most of us feel like when we're learning something, we have to remember it. And if you just let go of the need to remember it, it's such a fun thing to do. So part of what I like to try and do is experience a lot without having to remember anything. And the things that you do remember then are obviously going to be the things worth remembering.
The Creative Shift: How to Power Up Your Organization by Making Space for New Ideas, out now from Basic Venture. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us inside the Ice House.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.